me today is comic entertainer, actor and producer Freddie Davies. Freddie first found fame back in the 1960s when he appeared on the popular talent show Opportunity Knocks. Since then, Freddie's career has spanned more than 60 years, from being a stand-up comedian to directing theatre shows as a producer, a stint entertaining American cruise ship passengers, and in the past 30 years as an accomplished actor and raconteur, in addition to lecturing and mentoring to new and emerging talent. Freddie, lovely to see you today. Tell me, you were born just before the Second World War. What do you remember of those times?
I don't remember much about being born, but I remember shortly after that, the dreadful war started, the Second World War. And I do remember at the start of that because I do remember being pushed down into a tube station and coming out, and I think my most vivid memory is seeing the end of the street alight, in flames. And that sort of stuck with me. And then I was evacuated, of course. I went to a little village called Seend in Wiltshire. But my mum couldn't stand us being away, so she came to collect us, and we finished up in Torquay, or Barracks, where my mum could get a job and look after us. Having said that, my great-grandmother, her grandmother, was looking after us, the two kids, Michael and myself. I must have been 3 when we went to Barracks, and he was just over 1, I remember, because it was about it was 1941, because they took all the railings down around the parks for munitions. And the sad thing is they never used them. That was the terrible thing. We found out years later. But the act of taking all the railings down meant that quite a lot of private gardens were accessible. And my little brother, bless him, who's only 2, he climbed over a little fence in a park in Barracks into this private garden and fell into the pond. And that's another vivid memory of mine from my youth, was my mum screaming in the police car. But that was a family tragedy. And we were taken immediately away from Torquay in this dreadful memory, where my great-grandmother came from Salford in Lancashire, and she phoned her brother, and we were taken to Salford, where I grew up.
Did you feel that you had a childhood looking back? Did you have friends? Did you go out and do stuff?
I went to a lovely school called John Street. When I say lovely, they had 2 playgrounds, one on the ground floor and one on the roof. And the boys played on the roof. There was a big side, you couldn't jump up. Yeah. And one wanted to, and one on the ground floor. John Street, I think it was a council school. But that's where I started then doing jokes as a kid, because my granddad, Jack Herbert, was still touring in Variety. So all I knew was that going to see him when he appeared at the Salford Hippodrome or other theatres around, like the Hume Hippodrome, and there was a theatre in Attercliffe, a terrible place, Attercliffe. You say if you played the Attercliffe Palace, you've done it. You've really made it in show business. If I could get there on the bus, I would go and see a show there, and that's what cemented my interest in show business.
Was it exciting? What was the feeling you got when you were seeing a show?
Oh, well, it was all I wanted to do, because my granddad and my grandmother, as I say, were still touring in Variety and reviews, as they used to call them. My grandmother was a soubrette, which is a sort of everything that a woman would do in a review, to sing and dance and feed the comic and do all those things. And she was a very good soubrette. Her name was Ruth Beaumont. And my granddad, Jack Herbert, of course, he always topped bills. They weren't number 1 shows, and in the main, they were sort of number 2s and number 3s. But he was very well known within the business as a very good, what they used to call front cloth comics in those days. They eventually became stand-up comics, but we were called front cloth comics because you would stand in front of a cloth while they changed the scene behind. That's where the name comes from.
Were they always working?
No, they would, if he was lucky, he would work 2 weeks out of 4. And quite often you wouldn't get the date until the week before. And telegrams were of course, used in those days. And he would get a telegram on the Friday before to say, can you do Burnley the following week, starting Monday twice nightly? And if he was free, then he would.
Did you hear your grandfather rehearsing, trying out gags?
Never. Comics don't rehearse, you see. In order to rehearse, you have to have a reaction. So you can't really, rehearse gags. That's why comics always find it difficult to rehearse when they're doing straight stuff. The first time I did anything of a straight nature with other actors, they want to hear you do the lines the way you're going to do them on the night. They don't want to hear you approximate them, they want to hear you do them right. And that is a lesson learned, of course.
So when did you do your first solo act?
Oh, I was 10. I got quite well paid for it, actually, even though they took the hat round. My grandmother had a brother, and he married a lovely lady called Nellie. So she was my great aunt Nellie. I used to call her Auntie Nellie. And Nellie and Sid were publicans. They ran pubs all their life. And Nellie had about 4 sisters, and one of them, Auntie May, had been an ex-Tiller girl. And she and her husband had taken a pub in Walthamstow called the Crooked Billet. I was put onto a chair in front of a billiard table in this room, and everybody in the pub was invited to come in and watch this young cheeky fella stand up and tell jokes. And I used to do my granddad's act at the age of 10. And they took the hat round, and I got well over a tenner in the hat, which was a lot of money in 1947. You can imagine. £10. I remember particularly was I got one of them was they changed it, all the change and coppers in there. They changed it and gave me a white fiver as part of the money, a white £5 note. Amazing.
Did you have a performing name? Did you have a?
Oh no, I was still a little Freddie, really. It felt marvelous, really. I can't really remember much of it. I remember doing it, and I told the story to an actor who went to become a director, a fellow called Peter Chelsom, and he made it into a film called Treacle, which he did for Channel 4.
We'll come back to Peter Chelsom and your relationship on film with him later on. But going back now to after the war, so you started your performing. Did you do national service after the war?
Yeah, I did national service. Oh, yes. I was probably one of the last intakes. I don't think it lasted long after when they saw me, they thought, we can't be doing with this anymore. But I did, I did 2 years in the Royal Army Pay Corps, because before then my job was at the co-op. I worked for the co-op in the grocery office. I was the office boy. And because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, I think most kids at that age knew they had to go in the army when they were 18, so you sort of tread water before those. I was lucky to get in the Pay Corps because most of the lads were going in the artillery and the Remy and things like that. I didn't. Anyway, I went in the Pay Corps and finished up in Newcastle upon Tyne. I never got the chance of going abroad. There were postings abroad, but I finished up in Newcastle.
Were you able to perform while you were in?
Oh yeah, at the time in Newcastle, in the pubs and clubs, you could go and do a talent show, and they were called Go As You Please, where you would get up and you might win. There was a judges, and you might win. You could win a fiver, or 3 or 4 quid, something like that, or a drink. So that would supplement the income. But mainly when I was in the army, I used to travel down to London every weekend on a weekend forces pass to go and work in my cousin Pauline's pub, which is Nellie and Cyril. Their daughter was Pauline, cousin Pauline. And she had a pub with Bill, and it was the Pegasus in Stoke Newington. Still there, apparently. Green Lane, Stoke Newington. And they had a big concert room. And on the Sunday night, they used to get people up to sing and everything. And I would often get asked to get up and do a couple of songs, something. But I would essentially be waiting on. And Sid would give me a fiver to do Saturday and Sunday night waiting on in the concert room. And that would, I mean, I was getting 14 shillings a week in the army, so a fiver was due to keep me going.
What was it like in the barracks? Did you enjoy barracks life?
Oh, well, the barracks was okay. My first time in the barracks was when we were doing training in Devizes in Wiltshire, where the Pay Corps did their initial training. We did 4 weeks, and I was immediately commanded to run the party, the passing out party parade thing in Bristol, and that was at the end of the 4 weeks basic training. And I think they all paid like sixpence a week, or shilling a week, whatever it was, into this kitty. But I used to lie in bed in the barrack room. I used to tell them all jokes when they were all trying to fall asleep and get them all chuckling. And there was a corporal, and he was in sort of a room off the barrack room, which was his private quarters. And he told me many years later, he wrote to me and said, I used to listen to you telling these jokes, and I couldn't react because it would have spoilt the disciplines. You horrible young man, come here, and all that. And because it was just like that. It was to keep the discipline going and make people march up and down. Although I was excused boots because I got very raw Achilles tendons, so I couldn't wear the boots. I said, I've tried to make my life fun wherever I go. I try to get some fun out of life. And when we went to Newcastle, I mean, they still try and keep the discipline up, although you were working in an office. And you would come out of the barracks where you've been sleeping and line up in columns of 3 and march 10 yards to a bus and get on this bus and go to the office. So we'd be marching down, and we had a sergeant called Sergeant Barracks. Never forget it. And he used to say, "By the left, quick march." And we was a marcher. We all used to go, woof, 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 woof.